The year was 2027. After years of rising tension in the Middle East, accusations, proxy wars, covert assassinations, the region finally cracked. For over a decade, Israel had warned about Iran's growing nuclear capabilities, and the United States, though often at odds internally about how far to go, remained a close military ally. The world watched as diplomacy frayed, and whispers of war grew louder. On a cool March night, as the people of Tehran slept beneath a crescent moon, the skies turned to fire. At precisely 2:47 a.m., a series of hypersonic cruise missiles launched from Israeli submarines stationed in the Arabian Sea began striking Iranian military infrastructure. The targets were strategic: Natanz, Iraq, and Fordo, nuclear enrichment facilities that Israel claimed posed an existential threat. Within moments, American stealth bombers joined the operation, targeting air defense systems and communication arrays deep within Iran's desert regions. Operation Silent Dagger had begun. General Fareed Vaziri, head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's elite Quds force, was in an underground command center when the first wave of missiles struck Natanz. "We are under attack," an officer shouted. Multiple impacts confirmed, American and Israeli signatures. Our radars were blinded before the strike. Vaziri's eyes narrowed. "Bring our batteries online. Deploy every interceptor. Prepare retaliatory strikes." But the systems failed to respond in time. The American cyber units, based from a secret NSA-Israeli Mossad joint base in the Negev desert, had launched an earlier cyber onslaught that left large swaths of Iran's air defense blind. Tehran descended into chaos. Rumors spread of chemical attacks, though none were confirmed. Crowds poured into the streets, some screaming in fear, others chanting slogans of resistance. Fires raged across military bases near Isfahan, while elite Iranian drone units attempted a counterattack, launching Shahed drones toward Israeli territory. But Iron Dome and the newly installed US-backed Skyguard laser defense systems intercepted nearly all of them. In Washington, D.C., President Allison Grant, America's first female president, stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by advisors. Her face was pale, her voice firm. "Any retaliation on our forces?" she asked. "None successful yet," replied General Scott Heller, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. "Iran is disoriented. Cyber gridlock is holding. Israeli forces are taking the lead, but they'll need cover in Tabriz by dawn." "This was a preemptive strike," Grant said. "But we need to control the narrative. Get the UN on the line. Tell them we had intel that a nuclear test was imminent." The gamble was clear. The US wanted regime change without full-scale occupation. Cripple Iran's infrastructure, let internal dissent rise, and push the Ayatollah's regime to collapse from within. But the Iranian people were not so easily swayed. In the shadowy alleys of Shiraz and Mashhad, resistance cells and pro-government militias mobilized. While missiles struck above, the war shifted to the ground. A young Iranian hacker, Layla Maradi, only 22, led a counterstrike from a basement below her family home. Using fragmented servers, she hacked into US and Israeli satellite feeds and began redirecting drone signals. A handful of Israeli Hermes drones turned on their original course, one crashing into the Negev base that launched the attack. She became a folk hero overnight. Dubbed the Digital Lioness, her actions were broadcast across Russian and Chinese media, painting a picture of defiance against imperialist aggression. Within days, Iran launched ballistic missiles at Israeli military targets in the Negev and at U.S. bases in Qatar and Kuwait. Though most were intercepted, one missile struck a U.S. airbase in Qatar, killing 18 soldiers. America's red line had been crossed. In retaliation, the U.S. Navy initiated a naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. Oil shipments halted. Global markets tumbled. China, heavily dependent on Iranian oil, condemned the blockade and began arming Iran covertly through its belt and road ports. The war, once surgical and limited, now expanded into global theaters. Yemen's Houthi rebels, emboldened and rearmed by Iranian proxies, launched attacks on Saudi Arabia and UAE. Hezbollah in Lebanon bombarded northern Israel. Tel Aviv was struck by a missile that leveled an apartment block. Israel responded with overwhelming force in southern Lebanon, leading to thousands of casualties. Gaza also erupted in fire as Hamas tried to seize the moment. By the third week, Iran was bloodied but not broken. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Jalili addressed the nation. "They came for our land, our dignity, our future. But they will find only ashes in their mouths." Yet cracks had begun to form. In Ahvaz and Tehran, protesters took to the streets, not against the foreign invaders, but against their own regime. Food was running out. The internet had collapsed. Hospitals overflowed with casualties. The youth demanded an end to the cycle of war and isolation. President Grant, under pressure from European allies, and facing rising protests back home, ordered a halt to further bombing. Secret back-channel talks with Iranian military commanders, excluding the Ayatollah, began in Oman. After 29 days of war, the guns fell silent. The price was staggering: 12,000 Iranians dead, most of them military or paramilitary. 2,300 Israeli deaths, including civilians from rocket attacks. 147 U.S. soldiers lost. Regional economies in collapse. Global oil prices tripled. But perhaps the greatest casualty was trust. Trust in diplomacy, in restraint, in the idea that modern nations had learned from the past. In the end, the Ayatollah remained, but severely weakened. A provisional council of reformist generals began to share power, opening Iran to international monitors under a deal brokered by the European Union and Turkey. Israel claimed victory but remained on high alert, its northern and southern borders bleeding. America once again had won a war without winning peace.